Lots of meta shifting implications from 13.4 as Veigar is back as a powerful carry for mid and bot, Samira and Maokai have finally fallen out of meta, and is Crit Viego now the most optimal way to play him? We've got this and so much more to cover in today's video as we break down the updated tier list thanks to the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most recent data. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. The most notable trend up in the top lane for 13.4 is the rise of stronger laning champs. Quinn, Olaf, Ukshin, Pantheon, Cassiopeia, and Rengar are all performing extremely well as they have an easier time poking out melee champions due to the Doran shield nerfs. Olaf has been a relatively sleeper top laner in recent patches, but he's finally getting a lot more attention in 13.4. Ravenous Hydra is just such a broken item for Olaf because combined with his Q, you've got near instant wave clear. This allows Olaf to shove out waves extremely fast, be a massive threat in the side lane, and since you run Ghost on Olaf top, it's so easy to chase enemies down for easy kills when you have a lead. As a result of the positive indirect changes from 13.4, we will be moving Olaf up one tier, going from S into OP. Looking for a hard counter to many of the meta melee top laners? Malphite is your guy. W buffs this patch have been massive as a W max skill order has seen a 4% win rate spike. Into top laners who deal majority physical damage, W max is so broken right now as you not only gain bonus armor for putting more points into the spell, but your consistent dueling power is way better as well. With Q max Malphite, you can't really take extended trades and instead just look to whittle your opponent down over time, but with W max, you can go toe to toe in the 1v1 and your opponent will not expect the damage at all. All in all, Mal is back in a really powerful spot and one of the best counterpick top laners of 13.4. For the complete top lane tier list, we have Olaf, Darius, Shen, and Gangplank locking down OP tier spots. Another new top lane trend that's been seeing more play patch after patch on many tank picks is the priority of Sunfire Aegis as a rush item instead of a tank mythic. You just delay your mythic item until second, and by rushing Sunfire, you have a little more early wave clear, which is something that many tanks lack. Ornn, Sion, and Poppy are the 3 tanks performing best with the Sunfire Rush. Optimal low elo top lane carries include Yorick, Garen, and Nasus. Fiora, Darius, and Gangplank are 3 of the best top lane bans. It pleases us to report that Maokai's time on top of the jungle meta has finally come to a close. AP Mao has been destroyed by the nerfs, and if you're still wanting to play the champ, tank is definitely the way to go. Liandry's is no longer an optimal way to play Maokai, as Radiant Virtue is the much better mythic item in 13.4. The build to run if you still want to play Maokai consists of Demonic into Radiant Virtue and Sunfire Aegis. The champ honestly isn't terrible if you're running this setup, but I think we would all much rather go up against tank Mao than the sapling spamming AP Mao. Previously an OP jungler the past few patches, Maokai is now a good A tier pick in 13.4, not over the top, but still worth playing if you're going tank. As mentioned during the intro, Crit Viego has a lot more viability in 13.4, but is it the most optimal way to play him? It really depends on the game, to be honest. Crit builds have heavily shot up in win rate and are performing at about the same clip as the bruiser builds. If you're playing against a very squishy enemy comp that you can burst easily, going crit is amazing. Into more tankier comps that have a lot of CC, bruiser is still the way to go. The most popular and arguably the best full crit build you can run consists of Shield Bow into Essence Reaver and Infinity Edge. Kraken is an option too instead of Shield Bow, but it does leave you much more vulnerable. Shield Bow is generally the best mythic when going for crit because it at least provides a little more durability for when you're diving into fights looking for resets. Despite the buffs to crit builds, Viego's overall power level has not shot up a whole lot this patch as his win rate has only moved about 1%. We will be giving Viego the bump from B into A tier, but by no means is he a priority S tier jungler after the changes. Moving on to the jungle tier list, we have Fiddle, Evelynn, Jarvan, and Udyr as the most optimal carries. As mentioned in our pre-patch tier list, we were expecting Udyr to be hit the least out of all demonic junglers being nerfed, and that has played out so far. Udyr really hasn't lost much power at all as a result of his nerfs, so we have shifted him back into OP for mid-patch. Same thing in regards to the Amumu nerfs, as they were simply not enough to considerably shift his power level, and he remains a great S tier jungler as a result. Maokai was really the only demonic user hit substantially in 13.4. Even though Jarvan was nerfed this patch as well, he continues to perform at a very impressive rate while holding one of the highest play rates for any jungler, so he has been moved into OP. 3 of the strongest low elo junglers of the patch are Fiddle, Mordekaiser, and Rammus. Evelynn, Udyr, and Jarvan are who we have highest on the ban list. Range buffs to Veigar's Q and W has seen his win rate spike about 3% this patch, which is pretty substantial. Added range on Q is actually huge in so many aspects, as it helps Veigar farm more safely in lane and alleviates his main weakness of being a shorter ranged mage, making him less vulnerable in teamfights. When you're not playing into a comp with heavy dive threat, definitely try running Rod of Ages on Veigar. Rod Rush is winning a little more than Everfrost and is especially good for the lower ranks where games last longer and the early game is not as important. Rod into Archangel 2nd and Rabadon's 3rd is the core build to try. A tier is where Veigar will be placed on the tier list. Faker just recently pulled out some Gragas mid in the pro scene, but is it viable for solo queue as well? It most definitely is, and has been for a while, but it's never gained the popularity that it deserves, especially right now with Rod of Ages and Archangels being a very potent 2-item core. Gragas mid works amazing. You have a nice mix of durability and damage from the items, which is perfect for Gragas as a champion who needs to be diving into fights to be effective. You can also go full glass cannon with Ludens and Shadow Flame, but Rod of Ages is going to be more consistent for the majority of games. Gragas mid plays quite well into the majority of melee mid laners like Katarina, Sylas, Yone, Aurelia, and Zed. Faker played his Gragas mid into Sylas, as Gragas does a really good job at nullifying a lot of Sylas' dive power due to the strong peel from Gragas' E and R. If you're looking for something new to play in mid lane, then Gragas is definitely a good option, being placed in the S tier for 13.4. Mid lane OP tier sees a bit of a shakeup for mid patch, as we now have Annie, Aurelion Sol, Cassiopeia, and Tristana as the best mids. Riot ended up throwing in some last minute Annie nerfs that we were not expecting, so her power level has fallen off a bit as a result. Last patch, Annie was the clear cut #1 mid, but now after the nerf, she's on the same level as champs like Asol, Cass, and Trist, which is why we have moved those three into OP. Cho'Gath is a really interesting off meta mid lane pick as a result of his recent buffs. Q and W had their power bolstered for 13.4, and much like the Gragas mid, Cho does really well into melee picks like Sylas, Zed, Yone, and Akali. The silence from Cho W can be an absolute nightmare for melee dive champs to deal with, and since you build Cho AP instead of tank, his point-and-click R damage makes it very difficult for melee mids to survive in fights. Cho mid will be placed in the A tier for 13.4. Top 3 low elo mids of the patch are Swain, Malzahar, and Annie. Annie, Cassidy, and Aurelion Sol are the highest value mid lane bans. ADC was the role least impacted by changes for 13.4, as the Samira nerfs were the only notable ones. Not only was Samira directly nerfed, but the Treasure Hunter nerfs also negatively affect her. Samira has seen a pretty sharp decline in power as a result, and is being moved back even further down the tier list into B tier for 13.4. For the ADC tier list, Xayah remains the highest priority carry of the patch. Veigar is a really strong bot lane option now due to his recent buffs. We'd even argue that bot lane Veigar is in a better spot than mid lane Veigar, as he will be placed in the S tier. Ifelio's buffs have played out exactly as we expected, and have not moved the needle enough to warrant a push up the tier list. Senna is actually back in a viable spot now for ADC, so if you've liked playing the champ in the past, but had dropped her due to her underwhelming power level, now is a good time to consider picking her back up. Senna is by no means a top tier pick, but a respectable A tier ADC now. Top 3 low elo bot lane carries for the patch are Tristana, Misfortune, and Veigar. Draven, Xayah, and Twitch are who we've got highest on the ban list. Thresh is back in a big way for 13.4, as his buffs have been highly impactful. Key takeaway for Thresh this patch is that a Q max first is now the best way to play him regardless of the situation. W max used to be viable and arguably even stronger than Q max, but after the 13.4 changes, that's no longer the case. Q max first into W second and E last is the skill order performing the best. Another trend we expected to emerge as a result of the buffs includes Shirelia's holding higher priority over Locket. Thresh Q and E AP ratios were increased, and as a result, we have seen about a 2% win rate spike for Thresh players that build Shirelias. All in all, Thresh is back in business for 13.4, and we will be giving him the bump from S into OP for mid-patch. One champion buff for 13.4 that has exceeded our expectations thus far is Senna. Senna has seen over a 2% win rate jump as a result of her buffs and is looking like a really strong option once again. With so many of the range supports falling in power due to the starting item nerfs, Senna has been one of the few who's actually increased in power for 13.4. When it comes down to range support, Senna is now the most optimal for 13.4 and will be making a move into the OP tier. Support tier list is looking a little bit different for mid-patch, as we have Senna and Thresh moving into OP, joining Annie and Rakan. Melee supports are without question the most optimal for solo queue right now, exceptions being Senna and Annie. Thresh, Blitz, Nautilus, and Rakan are all incredibly strong, especially now that many range supports have fallen in power. Speaking of range supports, the mana regen nerfs have resulted in a decent decline in power for many enchanters, and we've made a couple of adjustments on the tier list to reflect that. Maokai's support is also pretty weak now due to his nerfs, so after being one of the most consistently strong melee supports for a while, his time on top of the meta has come to a close. Optimal low elo supports to climb the fastest are Brand, Heimerdinger, and Zyra. Rakan, Thresh, and Annie are 3 of the best support bans. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank-up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So that's going to be all for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck in solo queue, and we'll see you back soon.